All right. Well, welcome to this Thrive Today webinar. We'll let some people get on and joining us. My name is Christy Harang. Today I am being joined by our co-founders, Chris and Jen Coursey. So Chris and Jen, hi, welcome and thank you for being with us today.
Hello, good to be with
Hello.
you.
Yes, good to be here.
So we are talking about raising relational kids in a non-relational world. I'm going to share a little bit more about Chris and Jen in just a minute, but first I want to let you know about our topic today. We really see that our kids, they're facing a whole lot of challenges in this world, and it's really hard for them to live with joy, to live with peace, to be able to navigate their world in a relational way. And at Thrive Today, our focus is equipping people with the skills that we need to thrive in life and relationships. So we wanted to put together this webinar out of a heart of coming alongside you in investing in this next generation. So in some ways, this webinar is geared toward parents, but in other ways, it's really for anyone that is interacting with youth and parents. So you might be a pastor or a grandparent or a coach or a counselor or just someone in the community that's interacting with parents and kids. And so we want to come alongside you and provide you with some tips and some perspectives that will help you as you serve the youth and the parents in your community. So we're excited for our conversation. And just to let you know a little bit about Chris and Jen, as I mentioned, they're our co-founders. And Chris serves as our president. He helped create our 5-day premier skills training. And he is also the author of several books, including The Joy Switch and the 4 Habits series that he co-authored with Marcus Warner, including the most recent, which is The 4 Habits of Joy-Filled People. So Chris, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Christy. Looking forward to it.
And Jen is our executive director, and she also is the creator of our Thriving Mamas, which is a ministry that helps equip parents to spread relational skills to their kids. And she's our premier blogger our major content provider for our blog on Thriving Mamas. So Jen, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And we are parents. Chris and Jen have 2 boys around junior high age. I have 4 kiddos aged 18 through 12. So we are in the throes of this with you, and we're coming alongside you, really not just as people who train people in relational skills, but parents who understand this journey. So before we jump in, I want to mention that we're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. And so if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A feature and we'll get to as many as we can. So with that, Chris and Jen, let's see. Chris, I'm going to throw a question to you because we're talking about raising relational kids in a non-relational world. Can you tell us, what do we mean by relational kids? What does that look like?
Yeah, it helps to identify what is kind of the bullseye of what we're aiming for here, right? And so really what we're after to have someone who's relational is tuned into themselves. They're tuned into what other people are doing and needing. They have a desire to interact, right? They have a desire to have deep connection with others. And they're relational people are often in tune with what's happening in the minds of other people, thoughts and feelings. They're often aware of what's going on in them and what's going on around them. And they often seek security and closeness in their relationships. And so relational people kind of do a lot of shepherding to see that other people feel seen, heard, and understood and valued. They're kind of aware of the relational temperature in the room, Christy. So they have a sense as to what's going on, how are they doing, how are the people around them, and they're looking for ways to connect and ways to relate with other people. And usually they have a love for people. They're often very kind and well-intentioned, well-adjusted people who are just looking for connection, looking for some joy and peace. And that's a beautiful thing. And so as we think about where we're going today, it helps to have that on the table, right? Like, what is it that we're trying to raise our kids to be who, to be what, and really to be the best version of themselves in a world that's not always relational.
That's beautiful. I'm going to ask another question, but I want to mention to our audience, because we do have some people piping in. I would love to hear where you're from. So if you want to put in the chat where you're joining us from, we've got someone from Texas and someone else is coming in from New Jersey. So we'd love to hear where you all are coming from. So Chris, as you're talking about this, I'm hearing we're talking about kids who seem kind of steady and aware and have some good character and things like that, and yet there's just a lot coming against our kids that make it really hard to be steady, to be um you know filled with that joy, that peace, and able to navigate the world in a healthy way. So what are some of the challenges, Chris and Jen, that you're seeing come against your own kids or you're hearing from other parents?
Yeah, as a father, and kind of what sparked this desire to get together and talk about these things is just recognizing kind of there's a scarcity of relational skills that seem to be passing on. And I've just noticed the terrain is getting harder to be relational, whether you're driving down the road, interacting with people. Wicks are shorter, fuses are shorter than ever before. And what happens when people are not relational, you'll see an uptick in aggression, impatience, right? Instability, unkindness, what we call enemy mode, what our colleagues call enemy mode. We see a lot more enemy mode, which means pain and problems become bigger and louder. And frankly, as a father and as a teacher, with kids, and just someone who loves to work with kids, yeah, I want to do whatever I can do to help prepare them and train them and kind of raise them up. But there's a few more problems, Jen.
Yeah, one of the things that we're seeing and hearing about a lot is really screens. Screens are impacting kids so much. I mean, they've been around for years, but they're just so prevalent now. From texting, and studies are showing that kids are almost forgetting how to interact with each other, or they've not really learned. They're sitting across from each other at a table and they're texting each other rather than making face-to-face contact, because they don't the texting and the screen being in front of their face is what they're most commonly comfortable with. And I think also kids are struggling with managing their emotions. Managing our emotions is something we learn from people who know how to manage their emotions, which means we have to be around them. They have to have the skill. We have to be around them. We have to have face to face contact with them. And that's becoming less and less that kids know how to do that. Christy, you're muted, I think.
Sorry, someone was right outside my door, so I muted myself for a second.
Yes.
About it. But yeah, Jen, that's something that I'm seeing a lot of too, or even hearing a lot about, because the kids have a lot of big emotions. They're feeling a lot of emotions, and like you said, not knowing what to do with that. So it's like, I know at our school, they're wanting kids to be kind and handle tenderly the emotions of others. But one of the staff at the school said a kid one time was like, I can't even deal with my emotions. How can I help them with theirs? And just realizing that, yeah, the kids are really struggling in that. And I know, Chris, I think you might address this, but that's really impacting even depression levels, anxiety levels, and relational, emotional health.
You're exactly right. And honestly, in the 10 years up to the pandemic, there was a 40% increase with kids, young children, 9 and up, feeling the persistent sadness and hopelessness, including suicidal thoughts and behaviors. And so this was before the COVID disruption happened in our world. There was already a pretty frightening increase. And so as a parent, as a pastor, as someone that has a heart for kids, I want to do everything I can to actually help to spread the good stuff. And Jim Wilder always says, you don't need a lot of training for the bad stuff to spread, right? It just, you encounter bad stuff and bad stuff kind of spreads. But shouldn't the good stuff spread as well? So shouldn't the good news, and shouldn't relational skills and joy and peace and all of this stuff spread? And that's ultimately where we're going today. What can we do to help ensure that some of the good stuff is spreading, even as we're navigating some of the hard stuff that we're navigating?
Yeah. Jen, is there anything you want to add in? I had one last thought, but I want to give you a chance to add in
Yeah,
before
I
we move on.
just going off of what Chris said, the other thought I had was, as parents, we can feel afraid to say the wrong thing to our kids, especially when they're already struggling with emotions. And maybe we are struggling with the same emotions that they're having, or we're not sure, especially with the prevalence of that depression and the tendency towards suicidality. It can be frightening that what if we say the wrong thing and we send them into a spiral? And it's a scary thing for us as parents.
Yeah, absolutely. It is really scary. And the other thing I was going to add that kind of fits with that is that I think a lot of times we're finding our kids experiencing things and it's triggering our own big emotions. And so as parents, we're having a hard time processing like our own fears, our own insecurities. And then we want to help our kids deal with their emotions. And we might be like, I can't even quite get a hold of mine. And so that's making it an additional stressor for I think a lot of parents or teachers that are trying to walk alongside kids that are hurting. So we want to hear from you guys. What are some of the challenges that you are facing as parents or that you're seeing? I'm putting a poll up and we're just asking for a sentence or two. I'm only going to give you about a minute to answer this for time's sake, but we would love to hear about some of the things that you are experiencing that are making it hard to raise relational, well-adjusted kids. And I don't know, Chris and Jen, can you see if there's anybody who's answered it yet? Because sometimes it doesn't show it on mine.
It's
Oh, there we
yeah,
go.
there we
Yeah,
go.
it's
Now
popping
I
up.
think
Yeah.
it's
So we're going to give that a minute, but just as we're letting people fill that out, we really want to recognize that sometimes even just talking about these things can stir a little bit of stress or overwhelm or anxiety. And so we just want to acknowledge that and give you a minute if you need it, just to pause and to tune into that and take a breath. And just want to invite us all to remember that Jesus is with us in all of these things, that he deeply cares, that we are not alone. And part of the reason we are putting on this webinar is to be with you in it, and also remind us all that Jesus is with us in it. So I'll leave that open for another minute because it looks like some people are still answering it. But Chris and Jen, we want to get toward talking to some solutions. I can feel like there's a lot against us in raising relational kids. So we want to look at, okay, what are some things that we can do? And so we want to take a step back first and talk about how can we prepare ourselves and prepare our kids for these hard times and also build a relational and healthy environment in our homes to support relational kids coming out of our homes.
Yeah, that is kind of the $1 million question, right? And that's what I hear from a lot of parents as well. Like, what can we do? What we do here at Thrive Today is we train relational skills. So we actually help families and communities grow relational skills and to be the people God designed us to be. And like part of this whole process is growing capacity to stay our relational selves. So ultimately, one thing we can predict when I'm a relational version of who God made me to be, I'm going to navigate things so much better than when I shift into non-relational mode, what we've been calling enemy mode. And so when I lose my relational self, I go into the most restricted brain state, the most vulnerable state I can be in, where fear tends to run the show, where my capacity to handle the hard stuff is diminished, where I forget who I am and I forget what's important and I lose track of what's important. And so we don't want to stay in that place very long. We don't want to visit there very long. So staying our relational selves really helps us to navigate the ups and the downs of life, where we learn to recover when things go wrong. We develop some buoyancy, right? So just as a ship has some buoyancy to stay above the water, we develop some capacity, some buoyancy so that we can learn to bounce back, as Marcus Warner would say, when things go wrong. And we creatively stay our relational selves even during the hard times. And the problem that happens when I don't have some of these relational skills, it's hard for me to stay my relational self. And so the good news is we can learn to be relational versions of who God made us to be, and we can help our kids do this. And so relational people stay themselves under varying conditions in non-anxious ways. So what that means is I remember who I am and I remember what's important. And as parents and leaders, we can start developing some of this training and some of these skills in our own lives, and then we're going to be able to pass them on. And so one of the things I often tell parents when I hear from parents is, what can I do? Like, what can I do today? What can I do tonight when I'm interacting with my kids? And we'll get to that. But one of the big picture items here is you start learning relational skills. A little bit goes a long way. And that means that we learn to manage what we feel. We learn to roll with challenges. We learn to stay relational, and we help our kids find words for what's going on, right? So even as we sit with our kids and maybe they're sharing something, we're helping them find words, but we're sitting with them so they don't feel so alone. And one of the ways we grow capacity, which helps us stay relational and present while we sit with our kids who are processing maybe some hard stuff, we learn to stay relational. So these are foundational skills that, as we call them, the foundational five. So we learn to stay relational. We learn to be glad to be with our kids, even when things are hard. This gives us resiliency to kind of recover from our upsets. We learn to take a breath when we need a breather. Kind of, Christy, what you just did, that was good training on your part. You recognize the breather's probably needed because we're doing some hard stuff here. So just having a moment to catch your breath, being able to reflect on good times. And so what happens with a trained brain that runs on the fuel of joy is they often can access memories of joy when they lose joy. So we can remember the good stuff. And ultimately, as we stay relational, we learn to start seeing some of what God sees. And so we look at life, we look at situations, we look at hardships from God's perspective, inviting Jesus into those situations and having a sense as to what God sees and what God is doing. And the life model would call that seeing from heaven's perspective. So this is a relational skill. So what these foundational skills do is they give us that buoyancy so that we can stay connected with our kids. We don't minimize them or their feelings by trying to fix it, but we can stay with them and validate and comfort them and help them be able to find words and help them be able to manage what they're feeling. And at the end of the day, the experience that happens over and over again is children start to feel like, you know what, this is hard, but I'm not alone in it. Mom and dad hear me, they see me, they understand me. And so as parents, our job is not to try to fix all their problems, it's to stay present with them while they navigate their problems. And these are things that we can model with our kids, model in our families. And that's really good news right there. Like very practical things can go a long way here.
Yeah, and as you're talking, Chris, I got this picture that might kind of help a little bit. I was thinking about, you know, lifeguards in the ocean or whatever. It's like they have to be able to swim through really rough water and stay afloat. But how do we start? Okay, well, they start by swimming in very calm pool water, right? Learning how to
Right.
swim. And so thinking about, okay, well, first, how do we learn to swim ourselves in the calm waters? And then how do we train our kids to swim in the calm waters so that when the tough waters come, we're swimming and we're not being pulled under by the current or the waves and things like that. And so let's talk a little bit about that first piece of practically how do we get our kids swimming in the calm waters? What are some practical things that we want to do? And I don't know if you want to share your example of Joseph. I know that was something that was on your heart. And then
Yeah.
we can jump into some practical things.
Yeah, as we thought about this, one of the ideas that really came up when we were, praying about what to share was really the example of Joseph. Like God had shown Pharaoh some hard times are coming, and so let's do something about this. And Pharaoh wisely saw that Joseph was, God ordained here for this moment. So Joseph had the wisdom to prepare for the lean times by wisely starting to prepare and take the steps so that they can get through the lean times and get through those hard times when the famine was going to hit the land. And so in a sense, this is a really good picture for what we're saying here, that things are hard in this world. And in some ways, it appears relational skills are going to keep fading like the evening sunset. So the good news is there are things we can do now, today, that will help us be able to navigate some of those hard times. And so we can prepare our kids so that they have that buoyancy. All right. They learn to swim in all these various conditions, and we can help really empower them to be who God created them to be and be able to express that life in the good as well as the hard times.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah, I'd love you
yeah,
to.
I was gonna say, Christy, I just love the example you gave with learning to swim in the shallow end when the water is calm before you get into the troubled waters. Probably a lot of you came today because you are already hitting some troubled waters, and we want to get there, and we will get there, but we want to start by talking about how can we prepare for the troubled waters, because if we're not already in them, then we can do some things to help get ready, because eventually they will come. So we have a lot of practices we do in our home with our kids when the waters are calm so that we have that to access later. But were you going to say something else, Christy?
Nope, that's what I would love
Oh,
you to talk more about.
okay.
Please jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of dinner table practices. We kind of rotate between different things we do at the dinner table with the kids, whether it's sharing highlights from our day, sharing. Sometimes we'll do 3 happy and 1 sad. So like, what's something that was upsetting from your day, but then what were 3 things that made you smile today? So that we can share some of those harder things, but also focus on the good things. And we do a lot of discussions on the way to school, share appreciations on the way to school, or talk about what's going on in their classroom. And we talk about what is one of your favorite fill in the blank, favorite place you've ever slept, favorite. So those, again, those highlight type things. And we just kind of make that a part of our family rhythm, reflecting on good things, taking times of quiet together, whether it's just a few deep breaths in the middle of something, or taking some time to quiet on the couch together, building joy, doing fun activities together. We try to build up the reserves or practice those practice that swimming in the shallow waters. But Chris, what else am I not thinking of? What else do you...
I saw an interesting video with the psychiatrist recently, and he said something very interesting that resonated with me. He said there are 9 important minutes in a day for a child, and it helps to know what are the most important 9 minutes in a child's day. And basically said the 3 minutes when they wake up, the 3 minutes when they return home from school, and the 3 minutes before bedtime are crucial windows for connection and joy. And so I thought that was a very wise thing. So we have these opportunities or these windows with children, whether you're a parent, a teacher, grandparent, whatever role, you have a certain window with kids. And when you know what to do, little things go a long way. As Jen said, some of what we do in our house is we use these windows that we have, and we use them for interaction. Sometimes we use them for practice, to practice quieting and resting. We practice appreciation. We practice reviewing the day, recognizing the hard stuff so we can share the hard stuff and be together in it, but also to amplify the good stuff. And so what this does, Christy, is it helps people be able to get relational and notice, how does it feel to remember some of the good stuff? Did anything shift in you when you recalled some of those fun moments from your day? Can you feel any joy in the group as we're doing this together? It's kind of fun to watch what happens on everybody's faces. And we can predict, by the way, we've been doing this for a while, we can predict our kids will likely not want to do the exercise we're about to do, right? They don't want to do it. They would rather do something else.
Yeah.
But before we can do whatever it is they want to do, we're going to do the exercise. And you know what? It's fun to see their brain wake up with some joy. Like you can see the difference on a face and in a voice and in a body. So kids aren't always super excited about some of this stuff, but when you do this and you make it a regular practice, what happens is everybody benefits.
Yeah.
And so we regularly review the good stuff. And we also regularly learn to notice when we lose our peace so that we interact with Jesus to get our peace back. So that's an important skill in our household, whether we're losing our ability to stay relational or we're losing our peace. And we can you can feel it when somebody loses their peace. You see it on their face, you hear it in their voice, you see it in their body, you maybe even hear it in their words or their attitudes and so forth. So we become a people that frequently go back to the Prince of Peace to get our peace kind of recharged when we lose our peace. And we share a lot of stories, Christy. So that's another thing, that just storytelling really is like it's low hanging fruit. One of the best things you can do in your family is tell stories, stories of joy, stories of return to joy, God stories, like all kinds of stories are a great way that you can help to spread the good stuff. And as Jen mentioned earlier, with the screen time, don't get me wrong, we love our phones. I love that I can interact with my family when I'm traveling, but we do have to limit screen times, because we know what happens is too much screen time with young children interrupts their sleep. It places demands on their attention, so they have attention difficulties. And screen times have been shown to increase anxiety and depression. So video gaming and video chatting can really increase anxiety levels. And video watching can actually increase depression levels. So balance is key. I'm not like saying you got to throw the phones out, never use them again, but just try to find the balance of being able to make sure you're getting the face-to-face joy time, and not just using the screen time to kind of, make up for the lack of face time.
Yeah.
And I just want to add one more quick thought with what you're saying about the 9 minutes that are important in a day. That lines up with honestly something you may already be doing in your household, but you can be intentional about upping it a little bit. So for instance, when your child first gets up in the morning, letting your face and your eyes light up to see them, like you're excited to see them, that's building joy with them. Letting your face light up when they get in the car when you pick them up from school, or when they walk in the door from school off the bus, that builds joy with them. Snuggling with our kids, that builds quiet with them. When we sit together quietly and we snuggle, especially before bed, or we tell stories, when they get off the bus or when they get out of school, all of those are opportunities where you probably are already doing some of this, but knowing what you're aiming for can just up your game a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I was going to say the same thing. That's something I really try to do with my kids, and I can see the impact on them, just even if they like don't want to connect with me, and then I get them to make eye contact, it can like soften their face. So those things are really important. And we need to move on, but I do want to mention one other thing that I think is super helpful too is Chris and Jen and I can all attest, we practice these skills on our own. And because I have to be practicing them on my own to be able to actually live them out and pass them on to my kids. So I'm spending time building joy, remembering great memories, building quieting practices in my life. Like these are things, learning to spend time with Jesus and tune into what his perspective is on things. These are all things that we want to do on our own to help us so that we can build with our kids. And we're going to give you guys some resources and some things that can help you do this in your home a little bit later. So we want to move on, Chris and Jen. We've talked a lot about building capacity, getting us swimming in those calm waters. So now when those tough waters hit, I don't know if you guys are like me, but I'm like, okay, either how do I, like, if my kid's struggling, I just want to make the pain stop. How do I make the pain stop? Or if they're not acting like themselves, I just want to like get them to act the way they're supposed to act. I want these nice, clean answers to fix it right now. So Jen, is that what our kids need from us? What do they need? And how do we meet them in these turbulent waters?
I think that's more what we're hoping that they will give us, because we need it from them. But it is hard. It's hard to watch our kids be in pain, and it's hard to watch when they're not acting like the person that we know God made them to be. But we can't fix it. I mean, there are steps we can take, but we can't fix it. And that's good and bad news at the same time. It feels like bad news because we want to fix it and we want a quick solution. But really, our kids' deepest need in that is to not feel alone. And that is actually one of those managing emotions tools is when we don't feel alone in it, emotions feel more manageable. So as parents, we can find a lot of relief in knowing that our biggest job is not to fix the problems, especially since we usually can't, but rather to learn how to be with them, help them feel their feelings, help them to connect with Jesus, and from there to help them to learn and grow through the challenges. And all of that requires skills that are beyond just the left brain logic, having the right answer, having the right words here. Now, I don't mean to say there are problems that need immediate attention. So we're not saying you need to disregard those, but even as we pursue resources, um, it's really still beyond our ability to fix. And these tools still help us even as we're pursuing additional resources.
Hmm. That's really good. Yeah, it's important that we put that caveat out there. So, I want to mention, Jen, you said something I thought was really important. And then it like slipped my mind. I'll see if I can grab it back. Oh yeah, if our kids aren't acting like their best selves, I've realized that even to be able to like be with them when they're not being their best selves, that helps build them. Oh, okay. So somebody froze, and I don't know if it's me or Jen and Chris. So if you were live, can you see? Okay.
That happens to us all.
Okay.
She
So
was
did
saying
I freeze? Okay.
oh, there you go.
Oh, there
Now
you go.
you're back. You're back.
I couldn't tell if I froze or you froze.
I
Well-
couldn't tell either.
I'm not
Sorry.
sure. Oh, we
Yeah.
froze. Okay, somebody
Ah.
else is saying that it was us that froze. So
Okay.
Christy, you
All right,
said
sorry,
everything
you were
said
good.
they heard it was us that froze.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I was just mentioning that I think sometimes when our kids aren't acting like their best selves, being able to be with them and still love them and be present with them in those moments is so important, and that gives them like some security to be able to step into who their best selves are. Whereas I was raised, if you're not acting like your best self, it's like sometimes there was that rejection that came with it. And so anyway, so we want to create an environment where our kids can feel what they feel, where it can be safe to share, to process feelings, to know that they're not alone, where we can build this resiliency. But let's talk a little bit more practically about what it looks like to step in and help them when they're in their challenges. So, Jen, you gave some general concepts, and let's go a little bit deeper with that. Chris, you want to start with talking about how we kind of check in with ourselves first before we jump in to help them?
One of the foundational skills we practice
Oh no,
a lot and we train and we rehearse over and over again is the skill of just making sure you're relational. So we just want to keep that in mind before I go and have that important conversation with my son. Before I navigate this challenge that we're having, I want to make sure I've got my oxygen mask on first. So I just want to make sure that I'm in my relational place and I know how to hopefully get back to my relational sweet spot, as I call it, before those moments. Or if we're already in the moments, I recognize, oh, dad just lost my peace. So let's just take a moment. Let's take a couple deep breaths. Let's try this again. And so I find kids learn from our example more than they learn from our words. And so as we start practicing these practices and demonstrating these practices, they're going to start learning it themselves. So the good news here is that as we practice this, we are going to be able to do it with our kids, and they'll be able to learn by our example. So at the end of the day, our goal is to help our kids feel connected so they don't feel alone. Like this is where you get the highlighter out and highlight this phrase. Our goal is to help our kids feel connected, help our students feel connected, help our grandkids feel connected so they don't feel so alone. And otherwise, what happens is the moment we feel alone, that creates the toughest conditions to navigate whatever we're trying to navigate. So we become good listeners, and we are basically helping our kids learn to feel their feelings, share their feelings, and quiet their feelings. That's the sequence here. Every human brain in this world has to learn to feel feelings, share feelings, and quiet feelings. And as we often say when we teach this, usually the process breaks down at one of those steps. Either I can't fully feel it, I can't fully share it, or I can't fully quiet it. And so just thinking about one of the best gifts you can give the children in your life is helping them feel seen, heard, and understood, being with them, connecting with them, and helping them learn to feel, share, and quiet their emotions. That is one of the biggest gifts you can give them. So I often tell parents, don't fall for the fix-it trap, thinking that your kids need you to fix all of their problems and make all their problems go away. No, what they need is for you to be with them and even glad to be with them as they learn to navigate those problems and as they learn to manage what they feel. So we
Mhm.
stay curious and we stay focused on attuning with them, not just simply trying to fix their problems. And what that does, Christy, is it helps us be able to bring peace and joy into those moments. And I often tell parents, like, watch what happens if you can sit with your kids and you can be curious with them and glad to be with them and not fix their problems. Like, suddenly everything becomes more manageable. And these are skills they will use the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
So keep in mind, this can be very practical. Even a pause is a gift. Just like as we did earlier, Christy, you knew what to do. A pause was needed for a breather. Just giving people even the freedom to just take a moment and catch their breath and moment to quiet, that goes a long way.
Thank you, Chris. I want to give Jen the opportunity to share some examples of how this has played out for them, but I want to mention two quick things. The first is just when you talked about putting on our own oxygen mask, one thing that has become a very apparent to me through parenting my kids is that when I'm trying to fix it, typically I'm anxious and stressed out. And when I engage my kids that way, they're already stressed and feeling their own stuff, and then they feel mine and it's more than they can manage, and they typically, that's when they shut down, and that's when they don't want to engage with me and what's going on. And if I can come at it with, I've dealt with my emotions and I can come at it from a peaceful place and stay calm and regulated, it's like it brings peace into the situation and they are much more able to sit down and have a conversation with me. So managing my own emotions has been like number one key, and being able to help my kids with theirs. And the second, I love, you already pointed it out, but that as we do this process with our kids, we are modeling for them what it looks like to be the kind of person that deals with our emotions, that is able to stay steady, that is able to have capacity and be resilient and work through the tough things and come out the other side. The person you described at the beginning of the webinar, what are the relational kids? What do they look like? When we model what this looks like, then they have a model to follow to become these relational kids we long to see them become. So Jen, I would love to hear some of the wisdom of your experiences with your boys and walking this out with them.
I think one of the things that has helped us a lot is the validation and comfort process that I talk about in some of my blogs at the Thriving Mamas site. But the validation is kind of saying what you see them feeling, or inviting them to share what they're feeling, and echoing that back to them. I see how upset this makes you, especially like if I've just told them they can't do something they want and they're very upset about it. I'm validating how frustrated and sad they feel about whatever that is. And I'm not necessarily saying that they should be upset about it, by the way, because that's one trap we fall into as parents, thinking like if we acknowledge their feelings and point and validate their feelings, we're saying you should feel this way. No, we're just saying we see what you're feeling, and that helps them. And then the comfort step is, once we've joined them in those feelings, attuned with them in those feelings, um, again, whether we agree that they should have those feelings or not, that's clearly what they are feeling right now, helping them name it. Then we can offer the comfort step. What do we need when we feel so sad, so mad, so scared? What is still good in this world, even though this thing is so hard? That those kind of pieces are that comfort step, helping them and helping them sit in their feelings, and then also recognize that maybe what they're upset about isn't as big as it feels, because sometimes the things feel just huge, and when we acknowledge just how big it feels, then they can feel permission to notice how big it really is in reference to what the rest of life is.
Awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. And so, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, just one more thought I wanted to share. So that attuning process and helping them recover from those big feelings, it actually looks a little different at different ages and stages of life.
All right.
And so one resource that's super helpful is the 4 Habits of Raising Joy-Filled Kids, because it goes into those into at each stage. It goes into what it can look like. So real quickly, I see the question, can I give an example of what that validation and comfort process looks like? So For instance, it might, let's say my kids are upset because they asked if they could have ice cream. And I said no. So I might say, wow, I can see how much you really wanted ice cream. It's really upsetting that you can't have ice cream right now. I'm sorry that you're so upset about that. That is frustrating, isn't it? And then after they feel like I see what's going on with them, I can say, I know it's super frustrating that you can't have ice cream right now. What what can we still be thankful for? Or what do you need when you can't have ice cream? And sometimes they'll say ice cream. And, and I'll say, okay, aside from getting what it is you want right now, what would help? Do you want mom close? Do you want mom far away? Do you want a hug? Do you want to have, if you're starving and you can't wait till dinner, do you want to have some fruit or vegetables as a snack? That's kind of the way that looks like, that can look.
Awesome. Yeah, and we were just doing this with our 16-year-old last night. You know, there was something that he was really wanting, and we're like, I don't think we can give this. And that's really hard. And we had to have a conversation, and there was a lot of emotions. But honestly, because we were able to stay steady in it, it's like he was kind of riding these emotions, but we could stay down here with him. And part of it was really trying to imagine what would it feel like to be in his shoes. And it's not right or wrong, just, you know, I could imagine that would be really frustrating. Like, I get it. Like, just being able to jump into his shoes, to try to imagine it from his perspective. And it was great because it gave him the freedom to ride the feelings, to come back down, and to stay connected with us through the whole journey. And I think sometimes, you know, that's where it gets hard for us, is it gets too turbulent for us. So we kind of disconnect because we're trying to take care of ourselves. So as we build our own capacity and resiliency, we can ride more with them through those ups and downs. So is there anything else you guys want to share before we jump into some resources to put some of these things into practice that we've been talking about?
Well, the point I'd just give the encouragement in all of this is we start with the light to moderate emotions as we train our brain to do this. So we don't jump in that deep end of the pool when we're just learning to swim. We're going to start with really like, go with the emotion that feels manageable for you and practice. And so we do a lot of practices in the book that Jen mentioned, the 4 habits of raising joyful kids. There's a lot of exercises. So you can practice with small emotions before you try to tackle the big ones. And just keep in mind, you know, you're trying to stay relational. When you do the validation and the comfort, why that's so helpful for kids is because it's not only keeping you relational, it's helping you to keep them relational, helping them to be able to stay relationally on, so to speak, be able to be the best version of themselves. And so ultimately, these are ways that we stay connected even while we navigate turbulence. We're still connected. We're not going to lose the relationship. We are in this and we're growing together. And that just builds a lot of security, and it gives a lot of hope that we can get through these hard times.
Absolutely. And that one point, Chris, I have found there have been key moments where that's what my kid needed to know. Like, our relationship is not at stake here. Like, especially in those really harder times, to let them know, like, I am here. I am in this with you. We're not at stake. That helps settle down, especially when they're dealing with like a deeper fear of rejection or being alone, to know that there's not a risk of losing the connection with you. Game
Huge.
changer.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, well, we're gonna have Q&A in a minute. If you want to start putting questions in the Q&A, that'd be great. I'm gonna share some resources for you guys. And let me just say, because we always have more than enough resources at THRIVEtoday, resources is not our problem. Lack of resources, not our problem. But we do not want to, we recognize you are all at different places. So we give a variety of resources so you can tune into where you're at and what your needs are. So we're not trying to push all of these resources on you. These are to serve you and for you to tune into what would be a good fit for you. So if you are looking to just get some practices going, just to get started, especially with your family, we highly recommend you take the 28-day joy challenge. This has a little, Chris came up with 28 days of exercises, and there's a little calendar with the exercises on it. I printed this out brought it to the dinner table and did this with my family at the dinner table. So this is a great way to start getting practices going. You can do it personally, you can do it with your family, or just pick the ones that you think would work. So you can go to 4habits.org to sign up for that if you have not already. Also, we've mentioned several times the 4 Habits of Raising Joy-Filled Kids, right? That's the book you guys have been referring to. So this has great parenting principles and exercises. Again, it has sections on different stages of maturity of the kids and tips for parenting them in those seasons. So if you go to bit.ly/4habitspeople, and you're going to get an email with all of these links, so don't worry about it. If you miss it, normally I put them in the chat, but I wasn't able to do that today. And then if you want to practice, but you're like, I need to practice with people, or it would help you be accountable to practicing by practicing with people, we have 2 upcoming events. And we highly suggest you check out both of them. So one is a 90-minute practice class where we're going to be going through an exercise that Chris put together for one of our online courses that will take you through practicing the skill of quieting. And so this is on August 26th. And if you register for this, you will get a coupon code to get $15 off our 10-week habit builder group. So the habit builder group will go through 10 exercises from Chris's quieting habit builder course, and it's 1 hour each week. And we have a facilitator who will actually take you through the exercise videos that Chris does, and you'll get the chance to practice with other people and discuss in breakout rooms. So these are both excellent opportunities to just start building relational skills into your life and get some momentum going with that. And then we also have thrivingmamas.org. Jen has a great blog where we've addressed a lot of these issues. So she talked a lot about validation and comfort. She has a lot of blogs on that topic. So if you want to get more on that, you can go to thrivingmamas.org, and there's just a lot of wealth of resources there that can help you and support you in your parenting journey. And of course, if you are looking for something else or you have questions, you can visit us at THRIVEtoday.org or email us at info@thrivetoday.org. And I forgot to mention one last thing, sorry. On these practice class and habit builder groups, if you have kids that are really open to practicing with you and you want to do it as a family, you can email us at, I guess I'll just say info@thrivetoday.org because that's easier to remember, and let us know, and we can connect you with our online course facilitator, and she can see if that's something that we can help you put together. All right. Anything Chris and Jen I missed you'd want to add on to that?
You got it.
Okay. All right. Let's dive into some questions. Let's see. Okay, this is a great question. Do you guys do timeouts with your kids ever?
That is a good question. Start.
Sure. So what we actually do more than timeouts is what we call quiet practices. And so it's less about it being a consequence, although it can be used in place of a consequence, because usually when our kids are getting a consequence, it's because they actually need to quiet themselves a little bit. They might be too active, they might be too hyper, they might have an attitude issue. All of those can be helped by taking a little breath and getting their RCs back on. So that's kind of what our quiet practice looks like, is that the goal is for you to quiet your body down and get your RCs on if they're not. Now, again, that looks different at different stages. Obviously, you're not going to tell a 4-year-old to get their RCs back on because that's not really going to click for them. The younger they are, you may need to sit with them in that quiet time to help them quiet themselves because they need that practice of quieting with you. And so it's less of a separation from us and more of a, why don't you collect yourself moment? Why don't you take space to catch your breath is kind of what we do.
And we started when they were young with quieting is a reward, not a consequence or a punishment. So it's like, oh, I get to quiet for a moment. Okay. And we have a couple of dogs. So our kids love, if they're just needing some quiet, they'll go sit in the chair, maybe hold a puppy, and they'll just take some deep breaths. So when timeout doesn't work, it's often because there's no quieting skills. And so the timeout is just, I'm just kind of sitting in the stewing in the soup that I'm in, and I don't have any way out. So it helps to think through. The brain needs quiet in order to get back into relational mode often. And so the RCs, as Jen referred to, this is what we call skill 0, relational circuit. So quieting helps to wake up the relational parts of our brain so that they come back on, which will change behavior. It'll change thinking and help with feelings. All kinds of good things grow. So we recommend practicing on the good days before the bad days hit. So in other words, start practicing when you notice some piece is needed, or you notice a breather is needed. Like, hey, we're going to set a timer right now for 30 seconds, take some deep breaths, and you could do it with them. So again, if you practice this, what happens is they will eventually feel the difference. They might not admit it to you that it helped, but they will feel the difference a little bit of quieting makes, and to help them get back into their relational sweet spot, as I say. So just, yeah, quieting is a gift. It's a reward.
Awesome. And because someone was asking about the RCs and you mentioned it, I just want to say, if you registered for this webinar, so you're watching it, but you actually registered with us with your email and you are brand new to Thrive Today, you are going to get next week a series of emails that will introduce you to some of these concepts that might be a little bit unfamiliar. So just stay tuned for those, because that'll help ease you a little bit more into some of these things that you might be like, I'm not sure what they're talking about. If you're watching this on recording later and you didn't register, if you go to thrivetoday.org and sign up for our mailing list, you too will get those introductory emails. But our website, thrivetoday.org, also takes you through a nice flow to be able to get introduced to some of these concepts. So one question is asking, can I impact my 10-year-old niece when I have limited time with her? Her parents divorced 6 years ago. She lives with her mom and sister. Her mom takes her everywhere and she has late and busy nights. So it sounds like she's not very accessible, but she wants to be able to influence her.
Yeah, you know what? A little bit of joy goes a long way. Every time you see that niece, live in your face. Let Jesus live in your face. Invite Jesus to use your face to convey his joy as well. So be purposeful about expressing the joy, not overwhelming. You got to watch that you're not like over the top with your joy, but just there's a genuine glad to see you, glad to be together. And there's invitation to remember the good stuff and share the good stuff, or to be able to share some hard stuff that might be going on. But you put invitations, we don't force. 10-year-olds are going to respond better to invitations for something. And share some joy, share some stories. What's something good that God's been doing in you? Keep it simple, keep it fun. A little bit can go a long way. And pretty soon, the child associates seeing you as someone who's glad to see me and glad to be with me. And to be a non-anxious presence, just peace. Like, hey, how's your breathing? Are you taking a deep breath? If you notice they're getting tense or something like that, I try to lead by example a lot. So if there's something I want my kid to do, I will take that deep breath. Say, hey, how are you breathing? Are you, take a deep breath. Let's see what happens. So just a little bit of joy, a little bit of peace, a few stories can go a long way to really have some good connection.
One person asked, I'm a new MDO teacher. I'm thinking perhaps this would be a great addition for parents. Agree or disagree?
Oh, yeah. I mean, no doubt. This would definitely, as we're just saying, like a little bit goes a long way when you think about these things. And we find a lot of schools are very receptive to this because these are simple little practices that you can do in the classroom. And so teachers who've practiced appreciation, have practiced taking a breather and quieting, practice helping everybody get relational, they've noticed behavior improves, test scores improve. I mean, just across the board, things improve because you're providing opportunities for children to get relational, to be calm, to remember some joy, to practice some joy, and to be able to access some joy. So little bits can go a long way. The key is just keeping it simple and keeping it short. Anything that takes too long, you're going to start to lose.
Yeah. I'm going to ask, we have time for another question or two, but I forgot to launch a poll. We wanted to ask you guys, as far as helping our kids process their emotions, we have a Feel It, Share It, Quiet resource that takes you through the process of how to help your child feel, share, and quiet an emotion. And we were talking about potentially doing a workshop this fall on that. And so we just wanted to get some interest from you guys to see how likely would you be to want to register for something like that? This would be a low cost paid 1.5 to 2 hour resource. So if you can fill that out, we'll continue to answer another question while you're doing that. That would be great. So what does it look like to support a child through anger when they're mad at you and you mad at what you just asked them to do, and it seems like they're using anger to try to get out of it? So my husband will tell our daughter to quiet down, but that seems to be counterproductive to me. But it doesn't seem better when I try validation because they often seem to stay stuck in a big emotion for a long time.
It helps to tease out that sometimes anger is just, I'm not getting back to joy. Sometimes anger is an unprocessed pain or triggered reaction. And so if these are patterns, sometimes I'm feeling disappointed. So that's a trigger and I get these big, strong feelings. The goal is always to stay relational, to stay calm, to be able to hold on to peace. You know, the validation's always good. And just again, I see you're really mad. I'd like to talk to you about that once you calm down. And so, helping to provide opportunities for a breather to happen. And we don't, if normally when a child is in anger for too long or too intense, they go into enemy mode. And I don't even try to talk or teach in enemy mode. Like, we don't even do any teaching in enemy mode. It's like, oh, we'll talk about it later, but right now we got to catch our breath. And so just keeping in mind, you're trying to throw a life preserver to someone who's drowning. And of course the validation can help as long as you just keep it simple, but you stay non-anxious. I see that you're really upset. Let me know if you'd like help. I would often put some invitations out there, but you take the deep breath, you stay calm, and that'll go a long way. Anything you'd like to add to that?
I'll just add that once things have calmed, like later that day, the next day, another thing that I like to do is to process with my kids. Like, how did that go? Your RCs went off. You got really mad. You got really like offline. Did that help you get what you wanted? Like, were you happy with your response in that moment? And would you like to see yourself do something differently, especially if they're not open to any kind of help from me in the moment? Their RCs are just stuck off for a little while, then we'll process later, like, okay, how, because part of it is for them to internalize the desire to get back to relational mode themselves and to not just do it because you told them to. And so helping them understand the value for older kids, especially helping them understand the value in getting back to relational mode because things go better for them when they get back to relational mode. Yeah.
Yeah, and that answers the other question. Someone's asking if they're triggered and they don't realize it and they're disrespecting you, do you make an issue of the need to respect the parent or put that on hold? And that's the same thing as when emotions are really high, learning is not gonna happen.
Yeah,
So
right.
how do we help them quiet, deal with the emotion they're feeling, and then like Jen said, then we can come back and readdress things that need to be addressed. Okay, let's double back and talk about the disrespect thing or talk about how you want to do this differently, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it helps to know your children and what helps them get back into relational mode. So there's one son, if this was him, I would say, hey, would you like to go for a walk around the block and we can, get relational and then we can talk about it. Or another son would be, hey, why don't you come sit? Let's just take a moment and catch our breath. And so as you know your children, you also start to learn what helps them get back into relational mode or what doesn't help them get back.
Yeah. So let's take one last question. I'm going to deal with these two together. So one's asking with helping a kid deal with bullying. Another is helping an elementary age daughter process and deal with behaviors of her friends that impact her, like stonewalling, jealousy, silent treatment. So we've got some of these same things going on. How do we help our kids through those things?
We'll start.
Those are
Okay.
big and painful. So especially with the bullying one, you may need external resources. So we'll just say that that's not what we're going to get into right now, but just how can you help in the family, in the household, with those things. So hopefully the child is old enough that you can have discussions. I mean, if it's happening to a really young child, that is really painful. But if they're old enough that they're understanding what's going on and you can have conversations um, about those things. So validation and comfort, of course, validating how big and hard and painful all of this is. Um, Talking to them about how sad it makes you for them. So reflecting back to them how legitimately painful this is and how this isn't how it's supposed to be. Um, and then also talking to Jesus about how he sees the situation, how he sees them in
Jen,
that.
just be sure you're cutting out just
Oh, sorry. I keep moving away from the microphone and I have a quiet voice. Okay. So if they're a little older, talking to Jesus about how does Jesus see them in this situation? How does Jesus see their friends? What can they do? And um, so I'm gonna give it to you. Those are just off the top of my head thoughts.
Similar
But
thought. And just keep in mind the connecting goes a long way as you navigate, as you take the steps, whatever those steps are that need to happen, especially with bullying. Anytime our kids feel alone and the pain that they're navigating, the pain becomes harder to manage, harder to quiet, harder to process. It's harder to traumatize if the child's connected and feels connected. And so if you think about how does that fit with navigating hard things our kids are navigating, you want them to feel connected. You want them to feel seen, heard, and understood. You want them to feel protected. And then the way that we resolve or get some piece where piece is missing is also, okay, well, Jesus, what do you want us to know about what you see here? What do you see when you look at this situation? When you look at my friends who are being mean to me, or when you look at how I'm feeling, like just inviting Jesus into that can help to make sure we don't keep the rocks in the shoe, that we're actually helping to resolve some of that. But doing everything you can to help kids feel seen, heard, and understood as a rule of thumb is going to help navigate whatever those steps are that you end up having to take. If bullying, have to talk to the teachers or the administrators, like whatever you have to do. The key is that you're helping your child feel connected in the midst of that. That way I don't feel alone in this, and I feel understood, and I feel like mom or dad are with me here and they understand this. That goes a long way.
And that circles back to that earlier point that there are certain things we need to do, but overall we can't fix our kids' problems. So how do we be with them in it so that they don't feel alone? And also with connecting with Jesus in the midst of bullying or that kind of mean behavior from friends, it's so much easier for them to connect with Jesus in those moments if they have practiced it before when they're not upset. So getting to fit that in easier times or even just about good things before we try to connect about the hard things, it can help it be an easier process.
Yeah, and I'll give one last plug as a reminder that these things are typically going to trigger us as adults. It is very hard to see our kids suffer and not get triggered. And it might be triggering current pain, it might be triggering our past childhood pain and giving us another go at processing that. So really being mindful of that and processing our own stuff so that we can come as present with our kids as possible will give them a safer place to process these things. So it's an invitation for us to continue doing our own work. And the last thing I do want to mention is because there's questions we didn't get to, and we know, like, guys, this is hard. It is hard to see our kids suffer. It's hard to see the things our kids are going through, or the kids in our community are going through. And I just want to encourage us in all of this that Jesus, he's with us. He is with us, and he knows and he sees. And I can't tell you how many times I know the Courseys can say the same, that I've just been like, I'm in a tough spot here with my kid and I have no idea what to do. And Jesus, I really need your help. Would you show me? Would you teach me? And he's just so faithful. He's so good. So just to encourage you to lean on him and yeah, he is more than desiring and able to help us and lead us through these things. So we will continue to see how we can be a resource to you and support you in your journey. And if you have more questions, please feel free to email us at info@thrivetoday.org, and hope that our resources can be a blessing to you as you navigate sowing into this next generation.
Yes.
So Chris and Jen, thank you for all of your wisdom and input. It's been great to chat with you today, and bless these parents and grandparents and community members who are with us.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you for leading us, and thank you, friends, for being here. We just pray that God will, just grow good things in your life, in your family, and in your community as you navigate this terrain and as you try to grow relational skills.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you guys. And thank you, Christy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great to spend a little bit of time with you. We hope you enjoy this, whether you've been with us live or you're watching it later. Bless you guys, and we will see you another time. Bye-bye.